Welcome back to Adaptive Humans. I'm your host, Jami de Lou. Around here, we return to three anchors: how we navigate our emotions, how we adapt across differences, and how we steady ourselves when stress or triggers show up, because that's what helps us stay human when life gets real. This is episode 3 of season 2. We opened season 2 by talking about what it is to begin again, about recalibration, about the courage it takes to reorient when the ground keeps shifting. Last episode, we named what your operating system is actually processing: the invisible load. The invisible load happens in life and things that we're navigating professionally: compounding change, cultural weight, caregiving, identity fatigue, the pace of technology reshaping what it means to be competent faster than most humans can absorb, and even layoffs and reorgs and job searches that feel unending, all part of the invisible load. One of the things we said is, you're not failing. This is a behavioral force, and it shapes performance in every room where it goes unnamed. Here's what I didn't say explicitly, but what follows directly from that. When the invisible load is high, decisions suffer. This is not a reflection of intelligence or because we stop caring. Decision making is a cognitive act, and cognition runs on capacity. When capacity is taxed, decisions don't just slow down, they accumulate. The unmade ones, the deferred ones, the ones you made reactively because you didn't have the bandwidth to make them well. That accumulation has a name. It's called decision debt. Today, we're naming it clearly, not as a productivity failure, not as a leadership flaw, but as a systems outcome. What happens when humans carry more than their context acknowledges? If you're leading right now and something feels a little slower, harder, or more reactive than it used to, this episode is for you. Or if you're a part of a team or navigating change and you feel the tension or maybe a little bit of disengagement, this episode is for you. Beyond the bio, this is where we get underneath the surface, not the credentials, the patterns. I want to tell you about a yes that actually wasn't. I had responsibility to diagnose and implement change when I was in a role. And I did the work. The diagnosis was right, the data was clear, the case was clear. It's important to know that I'm a root cause change person, not a put a patch on it, not a Band-Aid person. And I'm clear about that. And I share that and the why behind why when I'm making recommendations. So I presented it. People nodded, the right people in the right rooms. Hard as the decision was, they said it was the right call for the moment we were in. They explicitly said yes. And I believed them. What I now understand and know that I didn't fully then is that the yes doesn't always mean yes. Sometimes yes means, I understand what you're saying and I'm not going to argue with you right now. Sometimes the yes means, this sounds right, and I hope someone else carries the weight of it. Sometimes the yes means, I want the outcome you're describing, and I'm not reckoning with what it will cost me. None of those are the yes I needed. So the change moved forward. It was implemented, socialized, done. And then came the murmurs, the secondhand feedback, the quiet suggestion that if I'd only listened, gone a different direction, maybe this would all be a little bit easier for everybody. Here's what I think actually happened. Somewhere between the room where the yes and the nod and everything would look like it was in alignment, a moment of friction arrived. A small group of capable, intelligent leaders discovered that they were more comfortable with surface change than with root cause change that was actually required of them and the situation. And when that friction got hard to navigate, it became easier to revisit the yes than to stay in it. I'm not sure that I could have seen it earlier. Maybe I could. Hindsight always makes you think you can. Friction almost inevitably comes with real change. You don't always know what someone's yes is made of until the pressure tests it. The decision debt wasn't mine alone. It was shared. They deferred the real decision, the one about whether they actually wanted what they say they wanted, and that deferral compounded into change that became harder to navigate than it needed to be. And I'm not telling you this to indict anyone. The leaders in the room were carrying real things. The friction I was asking them to hold was real. And organizations protect themselves too. That's not a dysfunction. That's how systems work under pressure. But here's what I want you to take from it. The most expensive decision debt isn't always the decision nobody made. Sometimes it's the decision everyone thought was already made. The yes was real. The follow-through required something that was never actually agreed to. And that gap between the yes in the room and the yes in practice, that's where organizations and the people leading them lose time. Sometimes they lose buy-in for the very work that they're trying to do. And that's what decision debt actually is. We talk a lot about burnout, about overwhelm, about cognitive overload. But there's a more specific mechanism that doesn't get named often enough. Decision debt is the accumulation of unmade, avoided, or poorly made decisions that builds up when capacity is consistently overtaxed. Research shows that decision-making and self-control actually draw from the same finite cognitive resource in our brains. Think of it like financial debt. A decision deferred doesn't disappear. It sits, it accrues, and eventually it comes due, usually at the worst possible moment with compounded interest. The interest looks like this. The conversation you didn't have in January, that's now a conflict in March. The strategy you didn't commit to that has your team running in 3 different directions. The boundary you didn't set that keeps getting tested more aggressively each time. The role clarity you didn't establish that's now a retention problem. None of these started as a crisis. They started as a decision that felt easier to defer. And why do we defer? Decision deferral isn't weakness. It's actually a nervous system response. It's that mind-body connection that we're always talking about on the podcast. When capacity is low, the brain conserves your resources. Ambiguous decisions, the ones with real stakes, real uncertainty, and real relational risk, they get pushed back often. We call this analysis paralysis or indecisiveness, or sometimes even being overly careful. But most of the time, it's not analysis paralysis. It's decision friction, the cognitive and emotional resistance that builds when a decision feels too heavy to hold alongside everything else already being held. Decision friction sounds like, I need more data before I can move on this. Or let's revisit that next quarter. Or I don't want to make the wrong call. Or I'll wait and see how that plays out. These are not irrational responses. They are rational responses to an irrational load. And we've talked about that a lot on the podcast of just what we're carrying and the compounding effects of all of these things. The problem is that each deferred decision doesn't reduce our load. It just adds to it. And there's lots of different types of decision debt. We're not going to be able to focus on all of them in this episode, but I want to cover about 4 of them. Decision debt shows up in many ways, But for today, let's focus on 4 types. It helps to be able to name which one you're carrying or better understand the impacts. First, the unmade decision. You know it needs to happen, you've known for a while, but something, it's the risk, conflict, uncertainty, relational stakes, keeps it in place. The longer it sits, the more weight it accumulates. This is the conversation you've rescheduled in your head more than once. Second, the reactive decision. You made it, but not from a grounded place. You made it because someone pushed, because a deadline arrived, because not deciding felt worse. This is the one that's made at 4 p.m. on a Friday because the alternative was one more email or one more call. Reactive decisions often need to be revisited, and that revisiting is its own form of debt. Third, the undiscussed decision. This is the one that was made quietly, by default, by assumption, or by avoidance. Everyone knows something has been decided, but no one said it out loud. You're in month 3 of the consequences, and no one can name exactly why trust has eroded. The undiscussed decision is the most expensive kind because it doesn't announce itself. No one can file a complaint against silence. And fourth, the forced decision. You made it, but not because the moment called for it. You made it because the ambiguity became too unbearable. The uncertainty of not knowing felt worse than the risk of being wrong, so you closed it. Before the information was there, before the conditions were ready. Nobody pushed you. You pushed yourself. This one is sneaky because it feels like leadership in the moment, decisiveness, moving things forward. But the team often knows the decision was premature before you do. So how does this show up in leadership? I see this in patterns across organizations, across roles, and across sectors. A leader who once moved with clarity is now circling, scheduling another meeting, asking for one more review, not because the decision got harder, because the capacity to hold uncertainty got smaller. Or a team that's misaligned, not because of a strategy gap, but because the leader hasn't committed publicly to a direction. The team reads that ambiguity as permission to fill it in themselves. Everyone goes a slightly different direction. Or an organization that keeps revisiting the same decision, the same conversation in Q1, Q2, Q3, nothing resolved, but the trust is just slowly bleeding out. Organizations carry decision debt too. It shows up as a strategy that never fully commits, roles that stay undefined, conversations that get scheduled, postponed, and rescheduled. The individual leader isn't necessarily the problem. The system keeps deferring altogether. And underneath all of it, invisible load that was never acknowledged as a factor. Because here's what organizations miss. Decision quality is not just a function of intelligence or information. It's a function of capacity. You cannot separate how a leader is deciding from what a leader is carrying. Sit with that. Brave enough moment. The brave enough moment isn't a dramatic leap. It's the step you take before you can see the whole horizon. Being brave enough here looks like making the decision that's been sitting. Not perfectly, not with complete information, and not when everything is necessarily resolved, but with enough clarity to move and the honesty to name that you're moving. The brave thing is not pretending the debt isn't there. It's naming it in the room out loud. Research shows decision quality isn't a character trait. It's a capacity state, which means the leader who's been deferring isn't indecisive. They're depleted. and depleted is recoverable. So, what does brave enough look like in practice? If you're a leader carrying decision debt right now, the brave enough moment might look like naming the deferral to your team. I've been sitting on this decision longer than I should, and here's why, and here's what I need to move. Sometimes it's making the good enough decision, the one that's informed enough, honest enough, and reversible enough to move something forward. Perfectionism under pressure is often decision debt in disguise. And also separating the decision from the relationship. Many decisions get deferred because they carry relational risk. Naming that risk directly, something like, this is going to be a hard conversation and I've been avoiding it, is often the first step to making the actual decision. There's also auditing the backlog. What are the 3 decisions that have been sitting the longest? Typically not the tactical ones. It's the ones with stakes, the ones where avoidance has been your strategy. Decision debt doesn't clear itself. It has to be named and addressed deliberately. For leaders who manage others, and I say that specifically because I think too often when we refer to leaders, we think that leadership is solely in a title, and it's not. We all have the capability to show up, leading things that we contribute to in different ways. But in particular, if you are leading others, if you lead a team, decision debt is contagious. When leaders don't decide, teams fill the gap. They make assumptions, they over-coordinate, they protect themselves from the ambiguity by shrinking the scope of their own work. The brave enough moment for a leader of others is acknowledging the cost of your deferral, not as a failure, but as data. And try something like, I've been unclear on this, and I think that's created more work for you. Here's where I've landed. Let's talk about it. That's not a weakness. That's leadership that sees the full picture. Just be reset. This is where we slow down enough to actually process what we've been carrying. Before we close, let's pause. Let your shoulders drop. Unclench your jaw. Feel both feet on the floor or the ground under you, if you're able. And let's just take a breath. Inhale for 4 and exhale for 8. We can do it together. Inhale for 4. Exhale for 8. Without trying to fix anything, ask yourself this question. What decision am I carrying right now that I haven't made? Just notice it. Don't force it. Just let it surface. As you're thinking about this, feel free to take one more breath in for 4 and out for 8. I want to share a quick decision debt inventory with you. It's nothing extraordinarily long. It's 3 questions worth sitting with this week. Not to solve in this moment, not because you have to have all the answers right now. Just allow your answers to surface what might be underneath the decision debt. Question 1. What decision has been sitting the longest? The one that lives underneath your task list. The one you've rescheduled in your head more than once. Question 2. What is the cost of continuing to defer it? Look at it specifically. What is it doing to your team, your clarity, your relationships, your own nervous system, your mind-body connection? Number 3, What would a good enough decision look like right now? The one you could make with what you know today, informed enough, honest enough, and reversible enough to move something forward and reduce the weight. That's your decision debt inventory. 3 questions to reflect on. I'll link them in the show notes. And if you lead others, sit with this. Is there a decision on your team that everyone knows needs to happen, but no one has said out loud? I challenge you to name it and make it, or name why you can't yet and give your team that honesty. Today, we named that decision debt is real. It is the accumulation of unmade, deferred, and reactive decisions that build when capacity is overtaxed. It is not a character flaw. It's a systems outcome. And it compounds like financial debt when it goes unnamed. The difference between decision debt and decision clarity is not intelligence. It's capacity and the honesty to work with what you actually have. We've been talking about decision debt as something that builds when capacity is overtaxed by invisible forces. But what happens when the body itself becomes the constraint? When the interruption isn't a reorg or a difficult quarter, it's something you didn't see coming and it decides for you. Join me in our next episode on March 17th for a conversation with Deja Heck, where we talk about when your body interrupts the plan. Around here, we return to 3 anchors: how we navigate our emotions, how we adapt across differences, and how we steady ourselves when stress shows up. Because that's what helps us stay human when life gets real. Thank you for being here. You don't have to clear every item on the backlog today. You just have to name one thing that's been sitting. One decision, not in judgment, but in considering how decision debt might stack up. As always, remember, I am brave, I am enough, I am brave enough, and so are you. This is Adaptive Humans. Real talk, intentional growth.